Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we're getting into the next Kings and Generals Winter War video, part 2, Finland's desperate defense against the Red Army. Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we're getting into the next Winter War video, part 2, Finland's desperate defense against the Red Army. Let's get into it.
On the western Karelian Isthmus, the initial Soviet attempt to break through was focused on the area between Summa village and Lake Agllayabi, defended by the Finnish 1st and 5th Divisions, but it failed. As December progressed, the Soviets continued to concentrate forces in the area.
What you're going to see over and over and over again in this war is the Soviets are going to essentially use their high manpower to try to smash over and over, just wedge through and smash through the Finnish lines. Whenever they're unable to do it with manpower, they will then bring in their armor to support the offensive. When that armor gets destroyed by the Finns, it not only is a huge strategic disadvantage to the Soviets in that area, it's a huge morale hit. Because the armor is there to support the main offensives, right? They're the thing that is the huge swing here because the Finns have basically no armor of their own. And so they'll bring that armor up, but when the Finns destroy these armor divisions, it's a huge hit for the Soviets overall.
The Soviet 24th Division attempted to push the Finnish 1st from the area around the lake, with no results. A new plan was devised. The 90th, 123rd and 138th Divisions were to join the attack from the west to advance in the area near Summa. The attack was planned for the 17th of December, but the freezing weather prevented the Soviets from using their tanks. Still, after a short bombardment, the 90th Division attacked the Finnish positions. This attack continued until the 22nd, with the Soviets losing hundreds. Only on the last day of the onslaught did the attackers manage to advance a little bit, as their tanks were finally able to participate. The 123rd Division started its attack near Muniswo on the 17th, and its tanks achieved a minor breakthrough, but the infantry lagged behind, and by the end of the day, 23 of 35 Soviet tanks were destroyed. Another attempt to advance was made on the next day, but the Soviets used the same route, which allowed the enemy artillery to destroy many tanks. Soviet artillery lacked munitions in that area due to logistical issues, and the attack didn't happen.
That's going to be something that plays out over and over again. The logistical problems for the Soviets affect everything from their clothing to food and artillery and arms and munitions. I mean, everything across the board is heavily affected by the failures in logistics on the Soviet side. And one other thing here, we're going to talk a lot about the defensive strategy and the lines, the Mannerheim line being probably the most famous here. However, one of the things that I want to point out is what makes everything tick is the Finnish soldiers, right? That is the thing it's the only thing that they have that the Soviets don't have. The Soviets have tank, they have anti-tank weapons, they have shells, artillery, men. However, they have the Finnish soldiers and the Soviets don't. It's the only differentiating factor, that and I guess they know the land better. But the Finnish soldiers over and over work in the most miraculous and heroic ways ever. They're great on the defensive. They'll show later, even though they hit some pretty hard walls when they go on the offensive, they will have more success later on in this war on the counterattacks. The Finnish soldiers are just, when you study this war, they stick out so drastically as being the thing that makes this possible, that makes this work.
To the west, the 198th Division was slightly more successful, managing to get close to the Mannerheim Line bunkers. The high point of this attack happened on the 19th, as both divisions advanced, reaching the forests around Summa. Unfortunately for the Soviets, The staging areas of their attacks were targeted by the Finnish artillery with ease, and they were losing dozens of tanks every day. At the same time, the Finns lacked their own armour, so the gains from the counterattack on the 20th were modest. Still, this was largely a stalemate. The Soviets lost thousands. Meretskov sent a telegram to the headquarters basically admitting that a quick breakthrough was impossible, and each bunker would have to be taken one at a time. The Finns attempted to use the concentration of the Soviet troops to the south of Summa. 6th Division, which was near Viipuri in reserve, was sent to the front with an order to attack the southwest of the village and surround the Soviet divisions. Simultaneously, elements of the 5th Finnish Division were ordered to move at Muniswo. This attack happened on the 23rd, but failed due to the lack of coordination with other parts of the front. The Finns suffered almost 1,500 casualties and were forced back. The troops called this poorly planned attack the Idiot's Nudge. The Soviet attacks became more focused after that. The 90th Division was tasked with taking the Popius bunker, but this wasn't an easy task, and in the last 8 days of the year, the Soviets lost thousands in that area. Meanwhile, the region of Ladoga Karelia was defended by Heiskanen's 12th and 13th Infantry Divisions, facing off against the Soviet 8th Army under Khabarov, tasked with moving 90 kilometers inland in 10 days. The Soviet 18th and 168th Divisions were to attack between Lakes Ladoga and Yanis, while the 56th was to attack the Loimala crossroads and the 1st Rifle Corps was to advance to the north. The 1st Rifle Corps' initial attack was successful, and it took the strategically important Agllayabi on December 2nd. Elements of the 12th Finnish Division tried to counterattack, but were forced back by the superior Soviet firepower, taking casualties. Some Finnish units started retreating beyond the Kola River in order to avoid being outflanked from the north. Mannerheim was not happy, reacting by replacing Heiskanen with Hägglund and sending Group Talvela to reinforce this front. This new force attacked the village of Agllayabi from the northwest, which diverted the Soviets' attention and allowed the battered Finnish units to the south some respite.
This is all supposed to be done very quickly by the Soviets, right? They have these plans of these, quick hits. We're going to have this huge invasion force and we're going to be way inland by a weekend, by 10 days in. There are strategic places that they're trying to take as they go. There's a railway right in this area that they're fighting in. It may be a little bit further south. I can't tell from the map right now. But there are strategic places they're trying to take as they go. But this is supposed to be a huge wave that just washes over Finland, right? However, there is this constant push and pull between being on the defensive and getting the Soviets caught in a vulnerable position. Because the Soviets are trying to go so quickly, they string out their lines in some cases. They have their armor back too far. They have their infantry out in a vulnerable place. And so you see kind of this chess match going back and forth of trying to outflank somebody here or push a division down here and open up somebody's flank. It's a very interesting back and forth here up in the north.
After a short pause, the Soviets started attacking along the front on the 8th. But as was the case on the Karelian front, the Finns used the time they had to reposition their artillery, which inflicted heavy damage on the attacking troops, particularly the tanks. On the 12th of December, the Soviet attempts to cross the frozen lakes to the south of Finnish positions along the river Kola also failed. The Finns crossed the Kola and counterattacked, destroying a number of tanks and artillery pieces, which led to Khabarov's replacement by Stjärn. On the same day, the Soviets attempted to encircle the enemy from the north by crossing Lake Agllayabi on skis, but were stopped once again. As the temperature plummeted to minus 25 degrees Celsius on the 18th, the Soviet headquarters ordered the 8th Army to halt the offensive and defend their modest gains. The Finns were less perturbed by cold, and on the 20th launched a counterattack against Natauja, which connected the crucial Loimala-Pitsieki railroad. This counterattack.
There's the railroad right there. And yeah, again, this is one of the things that the Soviets struggle with over and over. Their logistics are awful for everything. So if it's really cold, the provisions for winter clothing become a very big deal. The logistics being off now becomes exacerbated by it being this cold.
Along with one on the 23rd, was unsuccessful, but it prompted the Soviets to attack in that area, hoping to break the line. These attacks continued until the end of the year, and the Soviet losses were considerably higher than those of the Finns. On the southern part of that front, the 56th and 158th Soviet divisions outnumbered the 13th Finnish 3-1, and as the defenders' positions were overrun around Kasnaselka, they retreated and formed a defensive line in Kittilä and to the north of it. The Soviet advance reached the area on the 11th. Thankfully for the defenders, they had coastal artillery on Valamo Island and in the village of Salmi, which was used against the armour, destroying a number of tanks. The Soviet plan near Kittilä was to attack the village itself with the 168th Division and use the 18th Division to advance towards Lakes Siskayabi and Rokayabi.
This actually will become a very dangerous and precarious situation for the Soviets. You have the big guns right off of the shore there. You're going to see some pretty clever maneuvers maybe in this video, maybe in the next one, but by the Finnish soldiers. This is going to be a precarious spot.
Although some advance was made to the south of Siskajärvi on the 12th, the Finnish fighting retreat was costing the Soviets dearly. At the same time, the initial rapid Soviet advance stretched their supply routes. Most of the tanks were kept back, both as a deterrent against a counterattack and to save fuel. The defenders wanted to exploit this, and a counterattack was ordered on the 12th. The plan was to cut off the Lemeti Road and either surround the Soviet 168th and 18th Divisions or force them back. 3 task forces were created to tie down the enemy or strike deep in the first major Finnish counterattack of the war. Task Force Archer moved towards the lakes Kotajärvi and Saaksjärvi, avoiding the roads. On the one hand, that allowed them to avoid the Soviet troops, but on the other, when they finally came into contact with the enemy near Kotajärvi, they were too exhausted and didn't proceed much, save for one battalion, which managed to capture a section of the road to the south of Saaksjärvi. Task Force Bullet attempted to move towards the lake Haakajärvi and then south to Saaksjärvi, but was also sighted by the Soviets and forced back without reaching its objective. Meanwhile, the defensively oriented Task Force Ram had a critical situation, as the enemy managed a minor breakthrough around Kittilä station. However, they managed to push the Soviets back and plug the gap in the defences. As the attempts to cut the Soviet forces on the Lemeti Road failed, the leaders of the Finnish 13th Division decided to attack towards Mitro in order to split the Soviet 18th Division. That was a logical decision, since its units controlled a wider front than the others. However, the two-pronged attack was unsuccessful, and once again the Finns had to retreat with casualties. Using that, the Soviets moved the units of the 18th Division, taking Rokayabi and getting to the south shore of Lake Siskajärvi. The Finns once again tried to stop this attack by counterattacking towards Mitro, but were repelled. Unfortunately for the Soviets, they also were suffering casualties, especially from frostbite, so by the early hours of the 17th of December, the Finns retook Rokayabi and territory around Siskajärvi. Task Force Archer was moved to the west and attempted to cut the Soviet supply lines to the southeast of Lake Siskajärvi. They actually succeeded on the 18th, which forced the Soviets to divert more troops from the southeast to restore their line of communication. However, that meant that their divisions were not getting the requested reinforcements. Their foe was going to use that, and the Finns started to attack across the front. For the first time since the beginning of the war, the Soviets had to defend, and although they were successful, on the 27th, Task Force Bullet attacked to the southeast, taking Urma, which cut the Lemeti Road, making it impossible to supply the Soviet divisions quickly. The Red Army's attempts to retake Urma failed repeatedly, and their 168th and 18th Divisions were attacked constantly.
again, look at that situation that has played out there. Look how brilliantly the Finns have outmaneuvered the Soviets. They've cut the road. They've cut their supply line going back up to the very front there. They've cut their armor off from their infantry. This was just brilliantly, brilliantly done. And by the way, it talked about the frostbite that the Soviets were suffering up with their infantry here. Some of the stories that came out of the Winter War in general, but specifically up in this region from the Soviet side, are so gruesome. They are some of the worst, horrific stories ever. I mean, they are so, so, so brutally bad. It's so cold. They don't have food in a lot of cases. They don't have winter clothing. The stories are awful.
By the beginning of January, the Soviet salient at Agllayabi was pushed towards the Lemeti Road. The Finns were still outnumbered on this front, but their dogged resistance and deep raids not only stopped the Soviet attack, but created an opportunity for the Finns to go on the offensive in January 1940. Meanwhile, to the north of Lake Agllayabi, the Soviet 1st Rifle Corps pushed the Finns back 60 kilometers away from the border. This was a crucial region for the Finns, and they couldn't have afforded to retreat more, as that would have opened the troops around Ladoga to attack from the north. To stem the tide, Mannerheim appointed Colonel Talvela and reinforced him with additional troops, collectively known as Group Talvela. The colonel was a hero of previous wars, and his appointment immediately improved morale. Still, the Soviets pushed, and on the 8th of December took the river crossing over Kivisalmi. Talvela needed to do something drastic to change the situation, and on the night of December 9th, Task Force Pyari counterattacked. A third of the unit tied up the Soviet forces across Kivisalmi, while the rest crossed the lake and attacked the enemy 139th Division from the south. Apparently this attack surprised them, and the Soviets not only suffered losses from Finnish fire, but also started shooting at each other in confusion, which continued long after Pyari returned to his initial positions. This daring raid also helped with morale. At the same time, as was the case on other fronts, the Red Army moved too quickly in this area, which stretched their supply lines and made further attacks more difficult. Reinforcements were requested, but due to the nature of the war, they wouldn't arrive in the region until much later. Most of the Soviet troops needed some rest, but that allowed their enemies to dig in. To the north, the Soviet 155th Division was finally stopped by the Finns. More dangerous for the Finns was the arrival of the Soviet 718th Regiment to the area in the center of their line, which threatened the integrity of the front. Their attack pushed the Finns back somewhat, but on the 10th of December, the Soviets were bogged down in what was later known as the Sausage War. The Red Army's troops to the south attempted to assist, but were stopped in the area of Lake Agllayabi, suffering hundreds of losses. Talvela didn't mind continuing this wave of victories, but his soldiers were as tired as their counterparts, so the front was quiet on the 11th. The Finns had planned a counterattack for the next day. Task Force M would attack the enemy head-on to the north of Agllayabi village, while Pyari would attack from the flank. In this attack, the Soviets were forced back, losing more than 1,000 men and valuable equipment against 300 losses for the Finns. Over the next day, the Finns pushed the invaders so much that the Soviet leadership was forced to bring in the 75th Division from Agllayabi to assist the retreating 139th. This played a role in the replacement of Khabarov with Stjen, which we mentioned previously. However, the strict disciplinary actions of Stjen didn't improve the morale of his soldiers. The Finnish attack in the area continued until the 16th, when they reached the village of Agllayabi, pushing even the fresh troops to the east.
That is one of the things that you see a lot, especially early on in this war. The reprisals for the Soviet soldiers who run, for the generals or commanders who do not have success, they are so extremely harsh. it's wild. It's wild that this is the way that this war was enacted on the Soviet end. But again, if you ran as a Soviet soldier or if you lost as a Soviet commander, the consequences would be dire.
Both sides started concentrating more troops in the area during the next day. Although the Finns had the initiative, their attack on the 18th and 19th ended in failure. The Soviets brought tanks to the village and used them to start a counterattack on the 20th, but the Finnish anti-tank guns proved deadly, destroying them and allowing the Finns to counterattack. By the end of the day, the Red Army's troops were squeezed into the village. Despite the fact that the Soviet air forces attacked the enemy over the course of these days, the forest terrain rendered their runs ineffective. The Finnish attempts to take the village continued, and on the 21st of December, the Soviet leadership finally gave the order to retreat to the Agllayabi River. The Finns attempted to cut the retreat and killed many Soviets, but the encirclement failed. Still, Agllayabi was the first major victory for Mannerheim's army during the war. The Soviets lost around 6,500 men in these battles, while the Finnish casualties were fewer than 800. But was that enough? You will learn about that in the next video in the series, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We also have a second channel called The Cold War, and you can find the link to it in the description and the top right corner. Consider
Okay, so that was part 2 of the Winter War series. Like, comment, subscribe. I will get to part 3. Probably tomorrow is when I'll record it. I'm not sure when I'll release it, in the next day or two. But yeah, keep helping me grow the channel over here. This is seriously one of my favorite modern, military conflicts ever. So in the comment section, if there's anything that you think about it, want to talk about, have questions about, want to press me on, anything like that, I would be more than happy to engage with it. I love this topic, so yeah, help me keep building the channel over here, and I'll see you guys next time.